Last time we talked about how people get roped into beliefs that are, harmful to them personally, that depend specifically on our close relationships or lack thereof. Today, we're gonna dive deeper into a world of New Age conservatism and how things like occult interests, eating well or exercising, trying to better yourself in one way or another is used as a pipeline to fascism. By the way, if you are into reading any artsy type of stuff, by artsy I mean art theory, philosophy, some strange fiction books that bring upon a lot of conversation, then join me and the rest of my Patreon fairies for our live literature club or live media club, because we are going to be discussing different types of artworks, not only literature, but literature focused type of group. By the way, this is crooked as hell, but I can't do anything. I use this in day-to-day life and I put it up like this. So I'm going to stream discussions every 2 weeks over there, including discussing a lot of extra research material that doesn't get to be in the videos because it's a little bit too, it's tangential, but it's not on topic specifically. So I kind of cut it out of the videos or out of the scripts and we can talk about that. There's a lot to discuss there. This video though is going to be about 3 things: a brief historical context of where fascist ideology even came from, a brief context to our current state of affairs, some things that we need to mention, and a guiding list of sorts with things to look out for when it comes to any of the topics that you engage with, to be able to spot inconsistencies, pseudoscientific shit that has no basis in reality, and or a return of things that our grandparents were very familiar with and could spot 100 miles away, while we know a couple names of boogeyman and we just know that they killed a bunch of people and that's about it. Because let's be real, what's so bad about wanting to eat better or have a family or read a horoscope, for crying out loud? On its own, nothing. But without knowing all of these subtle ways of communicating that right-wingers employ, you might gonna end up going further right without even realizing it, especially if we're gonna do it collectively. Because at the end of the day, if all of us take 5 steps right, technically the people who you don't agree with to the right or to the left of you are still gonna be at an arm's length. They're still gonna be at the same distance that they used to be. So why would I, or anyone for that matter, tell anyone else that Nazism has roots in the occult or New Age spirituality or Eastern religions? Like many of you were pointing out in the previous video, well, in the comments obviously, a lot of right-wingers are Christians, not occultists. And you're right, actually. That is correct. There are fascists of all different kinds, actually. Like this freak, Frank Collins. And I'm not even shitting you. A founder of one of the American Nazi parties in 1970 who was Jewish. Do with that information what you will. It makes no sense. And yet, here we are. The problem with those comments is the fact that I'm not talking about well-known conservative pipelines, or even what neo-Nazis have become. Today we will mention them, of course, but the occult is just an ideological excuse, not the cause. It's simply an excuse for what disgruntled, entitled imperialists were gonna do anyway, but needed some kind of ideological leg to stand on. And there's a myriad of excuses they have employed over the years, let me tell you that much. Some so contradictory, you'd think they would catch on. You'd think they would notice, and yet they never fucking do. It's astounding, genuinely. Both the material reality of Germany and Austria and their ideology contributed to the development of Nazism, okay? It started more or less at the end of 19th century. We've got a time before both world wars, okay? Way before Germany's economic strife, but a time of rapid industrialization, okay? Everyone's moving. Many people basically being forced to be metropolitan workers all of a sudden to have a good spot in the system. Good in quotations, of course, because once again, this is a time when workers' rights were basically non-existent, okay? Under a new system, which wasn't feudal anymore, which obviously meant higher populations in the cities, namely Vienna. I mean, obviously other cities too, of course, but let's start with Vienna because this is where shit gets dicey, okay? The population is highly diverse to compare to a place like Berlin or Munich that was more homogeneous. This is not a coincidence that this is where Ariosophy is starting to bloom. Ariosophy is an ideology that has a name that largely explains their belief system. It's not that difficult to understand that it is simply wisdom of the Aryans. Contradictory in many ways. It is mostly racist nonsense of all different kinds. And at the time, Austria-Hungary was basically not just full of different people with various backgrounds, but it had substantial enough population of both Slavs and Germans that were always at each other's throats when it comes to, influence. The changes in Europe that brought about the importance of the consent of the governed cast a lot of doubt as to who the fuck even has the right to be in charge and to get everything while everyone else gets nothing. It basically underlined the unfair conditions under monarchies or under feudal systems. And monarchy relied on this religious aspect of who is in charge, of what the social systems even look like, with the royal bloodline believed to be of divine choice. God picked this guy, so now his lineage is in charge forever type of thing, Now that things started to shift and parliaments are now becoming common with constitutions limiting royal influence, do you think that people who were used to having shit because of their relation to the crown were happy about it? Do you think average people who were mostly religious, who associated royals with the god's word, would let something like this happen without any pushback? Especially when changes started to affect them financially, like having to go to the city and be factory workers. Being in close proximity with people not like them, those with German roots started to develop those folkish ideas I've mentioned in the previous video, which were agrarianism, let's go back to the land, develop rural areas, populism, which is the most vague descriptor of any belief system because it does not entail any specific beliefs, really. You just gotta frame it as a concern of the masses to get them on board. No need to reflect the actual interests of the people, just gotta appeal to them through empty platitudes and make them feel like you're one of the boys, or girls or thems, bitch, it doesn't matter. Donald Trump's approach to giving speeches and addressing the public relies on populism quite a bit. His choice of salt of the earth people he's appealing to are largely white, male, straight, and racist, but it doesn't have to focus on that group in particular. And most of all, folkish people had nostalgia and love for conservative views. When I say nostalgia, by the way, I mean this unwavering belief that there was a better time in society. With this statement depending on nothing more than just vibes, to be honest. Yeah, 90% of the time they mean it was better for a national group. And nationality is usually associated with a common view on things, which is kind of prescribed to everyone, and a location. This common view is also seen as not developed through culture or something, but an inherent part of an individual. This is where this whole thing, blood and soil slogan came from. That kind of became a Nazi shtick. We have the same blood and we're on the same soil type of shit. We're here on the soil that we've always been on and we share the same genes.
Sweeney has great genes.
This concept is also related to the folkish ideal of taking over Eastern Europe and all that kind of jazz. I don't know what the fuck is up with that. The explanation that they're giving is like, oh, it's central. If you have that land, it's really easy to be both in Europe and Asia, stuff like that. Ideally, what the folkish people wanted is the return of the feudal system. Yeah. Or landowners and peasants type of shit. With no one but German by blood people allowed to be landowners and farmers, and of course male. Don't forget about that. This idealized view of landowners and farmers is popular and cohabitates in the same basket of ideas as, conservative values like only one man of the house being able to vote, only the oldest male child being able to inherit anything. A lot of these ideas probably already ring a bell to all of you who use TikTok, honestly, and hear about trad wives. There's this romanticization of the land. Cowboy, farmer, 16 kids in a pastel dress with a man who has a toothpick in his mouth type of thing. And those same trad wives talk about, organic shit. And really, and I mean really, push the whole natural living approach to homemaking. Very folkish of them, actually, because with that nature worship, that's the same line of thinking that can excuse their need for social Darwinism and gender essentialism and racial nonsense, even though none of those beliefs are technically, scientifically accurate and are always, and I mean always, used incorrectly by these folks. Like, bitch, at least look into it if you're gonna build your whole entire life around it. The folkish beliefs, that have a lot in common with the American Republican, got the ground ready for that nationalism to bloom. But they were missing a key ingredient here, and that is an ideological backing as to why German people are superior. They have created some, pseudoscientific backing through saying that blonde and blue-eyed is good, but ideologically, religiously, how do you explain it? No one in the Bible said white is right. So what are you gonna do here to make sure that any and all people supporting you not only feel justified in their entitlement, but also feel virtuous and moral? And this virtuous part is key here, okay? Because you can't just rely on the privilege that those people who follow you get from the arrangement. They have to be righteous in their psychopathy to choose it willingly over and over and over again. So how do we make it the right moral stance? Anyone? This is where we got our two extra special boys, Liszt and Lance. There were more, of course, but these are the ones that had the most influence for a really long time. So let's start with Liszt, since he is older, and then we'll talk about Lance, the mock name.
Okay.
Guido Liszt. Right here. Or as he introduced himself as, Guido von Liszt, was the first popular Ariosophist. If you are wondering why I underlined the fact that there was no von in his name originally and legally, it's because von is used in German to indicate nobility. Yes, which old Guido was not one of. It's gonna become a theme here, okay? So let me actually write it down on the board. Liszt claimed that there was this ancient Wotan cult that had priests that were bestowed the highest position in Teutonic society. And if you don't know, Teutonic basically means like Old German. And they formed the first German aristocracy. Yes. Of course, he wanted to not just be part of aristocracy, but claimed to be a descendant of a priest, the priests of Teutons themselves, which would basically put him above everyone else except for God. Just like with deep ecology, Liszt underlined the importance of humans being part of the universe and abiding by nature's rule above all. But unlike the new environmentalist movement, Liszt also thought that strongly identifying with one's race is the result of living close to nature. Liszt pulled ideas from other people like Max Ferdinand Sebald von Werth. God. Anyway, a guy who wrote a book on Aryan sexology, yes, which is another instance of theosophical societies discussing creation of primal energy, co-mingling of absolute opposites to create superior offspring. Liszt implied that ancient Germans were practicing theosophy, a religious movement that was started, at the end of 19th century. How are ancient Germans supposed to be practicing a new religion that was just created? Well, he, just like the creator of theosophy, Helena Blavatsky, didn't give a shit that their beliefs are nonsense, okay? They didn't care. He took Blavatsky's ideas of root races. Oh, by the way, I shouldn't be writing like this. It's really uncomfortable. But so yeah, he took the ideas of root races from Blavatsky, which honestly, that idea was more about stages of development of the entirety of human race and not what we see as race now. There's 7 root races, starting with the first one where the race was ethereal, meaning it was made out of etheric matter. That race reproduced like amoebas, okay? There's a 4th race, for example, that was living in Atlantis. Yeah, that fake Atlantis. And the 5th one was Aryan, okay? Now, List took that belief and said, you know what? The 4th root was Teutons, and they were giants. By the way, all this information that I'm giving you to explain where he got his facts is practically useless, as you can see, because he just came up with it. Yeah, out of thin air. I mean, out of Blavatsky's thin air, but still. He credits Blavatsky while changing her theories quite a bit to make them even more racist than they already were. I mean, there was already enough there. He decided to work on it a little bit more to make it specific to his situation. The Aryan root race in Blavatsky's work was from dark people to light people, all people alive today, basically. List decided that he needed the Aryan race to be Germans. That's it, okay? Actually, I guess he also added Nordic people into that shit or whatever the fuck, but like, those people, they're not principled, so it doesn't really matter what they believe, really. I'm just telling you just so you know how ridiculous it gets. And the Teutons came from Atlantis, so that's where the fascist love for Atlantis is coming from, by the way. If you were ever confused by it, if you ever heard of it and you were like, what the fuck does Atlantis have to do with any of this? This is where it comes in. He also said they came from Arctoga and sometimes some other places. As you can tell, the math ain't mathing. Like, it's just not. Jesus Christ. What this actually did do, though, is it has given List this authority, you know, as a history buff that has a bunch of sacred information that explains what's going on based on really, really old universal truths that can explain and justify any and all cruelty against the non-Aryan races, who were beneath them, of course. The heroic Aryo-Germanic race was to be relieved of all wage labor and demeaning tasks in order to rule as an exalted elite over the slave caste of non-Aryan people. List codified a set of political principles for the new order. Strict racial and marital laws were to be observed. A patriarchal society was to be fostered in which only the male head of the house had full majority and only Aryo-Germans enjoyed the privileges of freedom and citizenship. Each family was to keep a genealogical record attesting its racial purity. A new feudalism was to develop through the creation of large estates, which could not be broken up but inherited only by the firstborn male in a family. These ideas, published as early as 1911, bear an uncanny resemblance to the Nuremberg racial laws of the 1930s and the Nazi vision for the future. The funniest part of it all is always, you know, List and Lance both being impure middle-class men saying all this, you know, it's already funny. This is why a lot of structural ideas were taken from India and Hinduism. Why some of those Nazi worshippers like Savitri, Devi were obsessed with appropriating their culture. It's all because of being inspired by the caste system. And you know, reading all this, all I could think about was how much time they wasted coming up with this bullshit. Like, who was taking care of their kids? Who made money? Who did housework? Who washed their stinky ass clothes? Anyway, the Mackney, Adolf Joseph Lance, or as he introduced himself, Jörg Lance von Liebenfeld. Yeah, was the other prominent theorist in the Ariosophy movement. And if you're sitting here wondering why is there a sneaky little fawn in his fake name that he used, and if it's because he also pretended to be aristocracy, yeah, Yeah, he did. Ooh, my favorite thing to write. Not only that, but he was also born to a woman of Jewish ancestry, which is so fun and fresh for a fashy little shit, eh? Lance assimilated current racist ideas into a dualistic religion. He finally identified the blue-eyed, blonde-haired Aryan race as defined by such contemporary social Darwinist writers as Karl Penka, Ludwig Waltman, and Ludwig Wilser. Basically, he popularized the idea of Aryans fighting for good and everyone else fighting for evil. He also claimed that Aryans mixing with other races was bestiality. Yeah. He also used actual scientists' work to push some idiotic doctrines. You're gonna say it how it is, you know? Genetics research being co-opted for eugenicists' sake. Most supporters of eugenics don't understand the principles of genetics at all, to be honest. It's frustrating to hear or to stumble upon. It's nonsense.
Particularly, I'll give a shout out to Adam Rutherford. Go follow him over on Twitter, where he pointed out that eugenics works so well that following the murder of 200,000 to 300,000 people with schizophrenia in the Holocaust as part of their eugenics program, by 1975, the numbers in Germany had returned to pre-war levels. Huh. Adam's new book, Arguing with Racists, is out now, and I can't recommend it highly enough.
He also took electricity, which was still relatively new to people, with its origins being unclear to many people who weren't even literate, which he exploited to claim that early beings, early Aryans, were gods, of course, and they could transmit electricity before they started mixing with the beast man. And technically all of us can transmit electricity. But whatever, man. Go off, I guess. Weirdly enough, while List was blaming Christianity as the reason for the extermination of the most superior Aryans, basically explaining why the old religion needed to be rediscovered by them now, Lance, on the other hand, decided to use biblical themes. Yeah, the occurrences, as foundations for his theory. How would Lance and List be both credited later by Ariosophists and Fascists as their inspirations, as some sort of oracles, when none of their teachings in terms of origins of Aryan people are compatible is beyond me. One thing that all of these theorists, priests, prophets, and visionaries have done is what I'm gonna call the 80-20 method, okay? For convenience. This method is basically someone coming up with nonsense, up to 80% off the dome type of shit, and then making rubrics, systematizing symbols and ancient languages to create a dictionary of sorts, where real-life symbols that have been carved into old temples or texts take on a new meaning. Every time there's a circle with a line through it, it's my foremothers leaving me clues for the new generation of godlike Aryans to be able to recognize me, their high priestess, so I can lead them to enlightenment. Then when someone, is hiking somewhere and finds a symbol like this, they go, oh my god, it's like exactly what Lisa said. Oh my god. We should all accept the fourth race root, giants, as our predecessors that suffered greatly from mixing with the beasts. And I'm not kidding, they genuinely took real shit, okay? Including scientific findings, all the new research about electricity, and used it to imply access to some undisclosed and very important information. It's kind of thing that they both did, okay? But I'm showing it on an example of List. With List using the tradition of coat of arms as a symbol of a specific bloodline in many cases, that survived even after the fall of ancient Germans. List supplemented these modest claims with a heraldic manual which demonstrated the presence of the remaining runes and numerous glyphs of Armanist provenance in at least 500 coats of arms, many of which were still borne by the modern aristocracy of Germany and Austria. Lance was absolutely obsessed with using electricity in his fake stories about ancient Germans, relying on the fact that it was such a huge leap in scientific research and implementation, with many people seeing it as futuristic and divine, immediately adding credibility to any far-fetched ideas, really. And those two guys, I can't write from this angle. It's so difficult, dude. I'm not even kidding. Anyway, these two guys and like everyone else who followed them, they are kind of like Maya and Anna from Pen 15 in that witch episode.
Is this magic? Like, are we freaking in magic right now? So did you not see the smoke that came out of my mouth? I'm a freaking dragon.
Go again.
Maya, stop. It almost touched. It won't touch.
So
I'm
your
sorry.
Your powers are stronger than mine
It's a
right
natural
now.
skill.
Bring me to it. Bring me to it.
Many of Liszt's and Lance fans made secret societies where they would share exclusive information. These societies like ONT and Thule Society peddled pseudo-sciences like no other. Phrenology, for example, such a load of bullshit. It's kind of funny. It would be funny if it didn't resurface every 2 business days with a new name and no other use but to make some people more receptive to pseudosciences, like with this TikTok trend of reading faces or looks maxing, which is also extremely popular with the right-wingers or people who accidentally got into the right-wing pipeline. That's kind of the whole point of this video, to be honest. There's a bunch of new names for old pipelines that are already hard to identify if you're not familiar with this history. And dude, many people don't even know that the Japanese were fascists in World War II and caused as much damage as the Nazis, let alone know the history of the development of this hateful ideology. Most new right-wing movements won't draw these parallels on purpose to have the ability of easing people into this nonsense, because the good old frog boiling approach works a lot better. Being into astrology does not mean that you'll become a fascist, okay? But you get into the wrong line of content if it gets served to you because of your other interests, or you get the wrong book. You might. Same with witchcraft or any of the religions, or even diving into history. A lot of literature and faux studies have been produced over the years, and I truly hope that fact-checking becomes a more established and in some ways separate field of study where people could teach others how to track down information. This is obviously a very standard practice in academia in general, but we need people to be working on this specifically in greater numbers and with narrower focus in terms of skills, because we are rapidly approaching a point of no return when it comes to misinformation. Technically, we are already there, but we still have some room to pivot. I'm bringing this up for 2 reasons. The first one being the one singular time that I have used ChatGPT, it produced a list of 7 books for me that I could go read in regards to this topic, and only 1 out of them all, out of 7 texts, was a real text that actually exists. Right now, you can still figure out that information could be fake. You know, like the text doesn't exist by looking for it and not fucking finding anything, obviously. But I'm sure we're not far from people generating so much slop to capitalize off of this over-reliance on automated systems that it will be impossible to sift through tons and tons of useless information to find something even remotely credible. Second reason being, I actually learned more about the connection between pagan religions, occult, and fascism relatively recently because of personal experience. I have been looking for texts, research, folklore, anything, honestly, of a Slavic pagan goddess of death and rebirth. Marena or Marana or Mara. There's like a million names, okay, based on which Slavic language you're looking at. And it was for an installation art piece that I was working on that was supposed to feature a Marina effigy or Maslenica. Maslenica is a celebration of the end of winter in Slavic cultures. It happens to be my favorite holiday. You set a massive ass effigy on fire, wear really bright traditional clothes, eat a shit ton, and I mean a shit ton of crepes on the streets with a bunch of condensed milk or sour cream or some other thing you like, honestly. And all you gotta do is participate in challenges like a pillow fight on a log or dance with everyone for a bit, and you get food for free because of that. Yeah, free crepes, bitch. This goddess always fascinated me since she was both supposedly a young woman and a hag. Baba Yaga is sometimes mentioned as well as like a version of Morena. She is the wildlife, she is both good and bad. It's a very interesting character in Slavic folklore, or I guess Slavic pagan religion, you know? However, it's hard to find much info, at least through non-academic means, by which I mean access to very exclusive libraries, and especially because it's in the West as well, right? This combo of not having access to the libraries and being in the West never bodes well for research of non-Anglophone cultures. If you are an Anglophone or you're not an Anglophone, but you try to study something that doesn't have a lot of translations into English and you're doing your research somewhere in the West in Anglophone countries, you know how hard it can be. The only book I could find that was basically dedicated to her was in Russian, so I ordered it, alongside a book on Francois Rabel. So I got the book, okay, and started reading it, hoping that it will give me a starting point of some sort. Just give me one reference I can use, man, you know? Right away, the grammar dude. Ain't this guy a writer? Like, what's with the grasp on basic writing skill here? I just don't understand. So I keep reading it. There's a lot of random references to things that the author assumes you already know. At first, it's a lot of terms I'm not familiar with, some figures that supposedly lived a long time ago, etc. But that's to be expected in a lot of texts. It's not a deterrent per se, but the writing style was still annoying the hell out of me. Then I started to see weird references to the battles of whites versus blacks, and I was like, what the fuck is going on? So I looked this guy up, and yeah, he's a pseudo-history freak that writes about race wars, Atlantis, Hyperborea, which is a direct connection to Helena Blavatsky, all the lists and all the lands, with him saying that Slavic people are the Aryan ones this time. His version of Jesus is related to Slavic people as well. Just in case you were wondering, I'm sure you were wondering, somehow, as per usual, pagan gods are coexisting with the Christian God and Jesus, and this contradiction doesn't bother anyone who follows him. Obviously, after I realized that I'm smelling a hefty dose of white supremacy in the air, I didn't just throw the book away, I ripped it to shreds so no one else who doesn't know who this guy is stumbles upon this nonsense of a book. The most annoying thing about all of these theories and pseudo histories is how little of a fuck the creators of them give. Just internal logic. I'm not even asking for more, dog. I'm asking for just internal logic. They have such low expectations for themselves, such vague rubrics for their beliefs that they are virtually unscathed in the eyes of their followers, even if or when they get questioned, exposed, discredited. It's kind of very similar to modern politics, where people on the right have so few morally wrong things that they will hold people accountable for, especially those people who don't commit the sin of being a minority, that they are virtually never knocked out of the political sphere for doing something wrong. A rape, pedo, genocide, you know, can all hang. They can all hang as long as they look the right way, have enough grasp on, populist politics. On the left, however, you are expected to make sense and have sound logic. Not everyone is crazy about it without allowing people to be people, but this is most of the reason why these secret societies can exist for such a long time while spewing absolute bullshit. Ariosophists, they managed to delude themselves into thinking that lists, Nordic and Teutonic origins of Aryans can coexist with lands theories that were based on Christianity, all because these guys just needed an ideology that will let them do unthinkable evil in the name of their imagined superiority. It's just a class of people trying to prove to themselves and to others through made-up ideology that they have the right to be in the upper class while everyone else is supposed to serve them. Both Thule Society and the ONT, including some other groups that were shuffling people around, have eventually become DAP. Eventually, these occult groups were suppressed by the Gestapo in early 1940s. If you think it was for some noble reasons, it wasn't. Honestly, I doubt any of you thought so, but the reason for that suppression was actually in Hitler's ideas regarding best plan of action to get real power for the Nazi party. He was actually into the occult, read journals like Ostara, which was published from 1905 to around 1917, had a really funny tagline, Newsletter of the Blonde and the Masculists. Masculists were fighting for men's rights, which is so comical, bitch. Like, if you know enough about German history at the time, because the fact of the matter is, German women couldn't even vote at the time. So it's quite funny that they were so pissed already. You know, he still chose to suppress those occultists, even though he agreed with them on everything and they had the same type of views. The only thing was about how he wanted to approach it. And the most important part here is that they already did what he wanted them to do. Create high-ranking Ariosophists and spread ideas of this German superiority. Their secrecy and the small exclusive circles were stifling their progress. You need consent of the masses. You need the message to be clear and attractive. And none of this voodoo-flavored shit was gonna cut it if you wanted the support of a large group of people. You gotta be openly a political activist to organize political movements. So, what kind of seemingly neutral things are in the vicinity of right-wingers, where you can slip into the wrong part of the algorithm or real world and get fed nonsense? As you can probably tell, there's a lot of similarities in the belief systems of trad wives and their trad husbands and folkish people, right? Making things from scratch, wearing old school outfits, usually of the 1950s era America, having a shit ton of kids, trying to be close to earth and nature, and either believing in nature's rule above all or God's rule above all, with both mutating into like a weird form of virtuous eugenics. There's such a strange mix of things going on where contradictions start to fuel more contradictions, like the hippie stereotype of love, not war, being a lot more surface level or rare to find in general, to compare to hippies or granola people that believe in the same human origin as Theosophists, bringing up Atlantis or Hyperborea, with a weird bend into hating humanity as some sort of plague on the earth. As if people didn't live here for like ages without ruining shit until capitalism did unimaginable damage in like, what, 200 to 400 years at most. This weird phenomenon of Eastern spirituality being mixed with deep ecology and fascist ideology is discussed at length by Nicholas Goodrick-Clarke in his book Savitri Devi, or Maximiani Julia Portas, called Hitler's Priestess, Savitri Devi, the Hindu-Aryan Myth and Neo-Nazism. Savitri Devi's influence on international neo-Nazism and other hybrid strains of mystical fascism has been continuous since the mid-1960s and beyond her death into the 1990s. In New Age groups' writings, paganism, magic, and the natural order act as a foil for a cleansing wave of fascist violence that will sweep away a corrupt humanity, leaving only Aryans in possession of a pristine world. Once human beings are stigmatized as a threat to Mother Nature, Christian and Enlightenment notion and the sanctity of human life start to retreat. Nazi modes of thought concerning unfit life, which is the old, sick, and indigent, hierarchies of human value, and eugenic programs find ready acceptance among those who despair of mankind. If we just go ahead and blame humanity as a whole, as if the negative impacts of economic systems is inherent to human nature, we're making it basically impossible to critique those who are actually responsible for these effects on the environment, deflecting all criticism of capitalism without question. Basically, the suggestion that economic strife is an individual problem that can be solved through conservatism, combined with attracting more liberal people to the far right through mostly environmental concern, because it's technically coming from empathy at the start, so you can pull people through that. It's a perfect way of attracting people of the 21st century to not only accept fascism as the only way forward, but to soften the public to accept the horrors that fascism requires. There's this quote at the end of that same book on Savitri, Devi: "Only by denying the special status of a man and his anthropocentric traditions of Judaism, Christianity, humanism, and socialism can capitalism soften up democracy to accept the mass dying of third world populations, as well as the euthanasia of the elderly, ill, poor, and redundant of the rich North." One of the most important things I want to leave you with, especially those of you that don't concern themselves with the plight of others, least of all of the elderly, ill, and poor of the world, it's this pill that's going to be hard to swallow. Statistically speaking, all of you are not young enough, healthy enough, nor immortal or impervious to decay, not even rich enough not to be next in line to qualify for a forced travel voucher to your local concentration camp, whether metaphorical, by which I mean bureaucratic, or not. I know a lot of people who see themselves as, conservative, think that they are the great specimen that should be reproduced and passed on, and I can guarantee with almost 100% certainty that you are not, because not a single person is. So maybe reevaluate who your friends or allies are, because it sure as fuck won't be the person who wants to cleanse this earth of corrupt specimen. I think many of these, especially the environmental routes or Eastern religions or pink pill content, are a bit more tricky for us to spot, honestly. So I hope that this video is going to be helpful in making these unexpected live, love to cleanse this earth type of unexpected connections in these ideologies make a little bit more sense, so you could spot them quicker and steer clear of them. In any case, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.